Everyone, welcome back to our channel, and today we're going to be bringing you our wrap-up for July and for Booktubeathon.
I have 17 things to talk about.
I have 9 total, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why don't you go first?
Do you want me to start?
Go ahead and start.
Okay. At the beginning of this month, I finished the rest of the Raven cycle, which was The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily Lily Blue, and The Raven King, all by Maggie Stiefvater, and I gave all 3 of them 5 stars.
The first thing I'm going to talk about is I read volumes 18 through 24 of Claymore, and this is by Norihiro Yagi. This is the story about monsters and monster hunters and the thin line between them and the politics involved, and this is very late in the series. I think it's rounding out towards the end, but it's getting very exciting. I'm rating those 5 stars because they're really good.
Okay, the next 2 things that I read this month were number 2 and 2.5 in the Hard Ink series by Laura Kay. And I gave number 2, Hard As You Can, 3 stars, and then 2.5, Hard to Hold On To, I gave that 4 stars. I thought that was the best one in the series so far, and it makes me kind of irritated that it was like a 0.5, and so a lot of people probably didn't read it.
Mm-hmm. The next thing is I finally figured out that I have finished The Reality Dysfunction. This is book 1 in a trilogy that's called the Night's Dawn trilogy, and what I listened to was apparently books 1 and 2, probably, so
Nice.
I'm not going to complete it because I am really not tied to the story, even for having apparently read 2 novels of it.
And only the
it's
first one's on your list?
And only the first one's on my list there, so I gave this, what did I give this? I gave this 2 stars because I really didn't absorb much any of it, so. Yeah, not so good for Peter F. Hamilton because he's the author of Pandora's Star, which is that one that's been floating with me for forever, pretty much all year.
I listened to I Am America and So Can You, or So Are You, or something like that, by Stephen Colbert. I listened to this in just a couple hours at work, and it was exactly what I needed. It was funny. Stephen Colbert is usually funny for me. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't exactly anything special.
Moving.
But yeah, but it was incredibly amusing.
The next thing I read is Gateway by Frederick Pohl. This was a little disappointing because I was looking forward to this one because it has this great premise that there's this asteroid that has these alien ships on it that can shoot you to any part of the galaxy, and it's like a gold rush. People from all over go for prospecting, things like that, and so it seemed like this was going to have lots of adventure and mystery and everything. Yeah. This was actually a character study of the psychology of someone that has spent a majority of their life on Gateway, and I think it's after he's already become rich, but he's still like upset with his life or something like that. I gave this 2 stars. What I will give this credit for is representation and its time. A very small part of this book is about the main character coming to terms or coming to acceptance with himself that he's bisexual. So, and this was written, I think, in the 70s, something. So,
well, that's something that you don't usually see in a lot of those older sci-fi.
Absolutely.
Nice. That sounds like more a character-driven story. That's usually what I go for.
Yes.
And you're usually more for the plot.
So you might like it.
I might like it. Who knows? Okay. The next thing I listened to on audiobook is Don't Ever Get Old by Daniel Friedman. And this is book 1 in a duology, but I actually DNF'd the second one. I just didn't want to do them back to back. But I gave this 4 stars. It has a really funny premise. This old, like, 80-some-odd-year-old, crotchety old man, like, retired police detective, teams up with his grandson to try and solve this mystery. And he's just so funny because he doesn't really care about anyone or anything. He just gets roped into all of these shenanigans. And he's like trying to come to terms with the fact that he is at the end of his life, so he can't do the things that he used to be able to do. At one point, he tries to like punch a suspect in the face, and he ends up hurting himself so much worse than the guy. And the guy was like, "Really, old man? It's the best you got?" I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars.
The next thing that I finished in July, this was Heidi's challenge to me, and this is The Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This is a fantasy, fantasy.
I think they call it sci-fantasy. Mostly fantasy.
But kings, swords, spells, stuff like that, and it was
blood, lots of blood.
There's lots of blood, yeah. As far as it being standout, I wouldn't say for me it was anything standout. Kind of follows the sort of fantasy arc. I wasn't particularly tied to or, in love with the main character. I was pretty neutral as far as his character, Anyway, I gave it 3 stars, which is actually apparently a rare review that it gets.
A lot of people
usually either 5 or 1.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of people love it or hate it. Not a lot of middle ground.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it was solidly middle of the road.
So I read 2 Ender stories, Ender in Exile, and then a short novella, which was A War of Gifts by Orson Scott Card. I really enjoyed them both. I gave Ender in Exile 4 stars. It was a lot less of actually Ender in Exile than I really thought it was going to be. It was mostly the journey from command school to the colony that they were going to. They were only there very briefly, which I thought was an interesting take on it. It wasn't what I was expecting.
Okay.
And then A War of Gifts was a shorter story about back in battle school, and all of the kids decide to rebel against the teachers, and they're like, we're celebrating Christmas. You can't stop us. And I thought that was great. I gave it 5 stars.
Nice. The next thing I read in July was The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. This is a pretty short story, but it's about a future where there are precogs and telepaths, things like that pretty much monitor everything, and so murder and crime is not really a thing anymore. And this main character decides he's going to murder someone as a business competitor, and so that's the story of him trying to orchestrate that and how that proceeds. And I actually found this a very fascinating story. I gave this one 3 stars. It didn't blow me away. I don't know if it's going to stick with me like The Star's My Destination, which is another Alfred Bester I've read that's also on the sci-fi list. I'd definitely recommend that one before I would recommend this one. But 3 stars. It was enjoyable and fun. Yeah.
Okay, I read The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, and this is a giant chunker of a novel. I did not expect it to be this big. But I was highly anticipating this. It is a comedy about this rich kid going on tour around Europe and getting into shenanigans and getting really drunk in public and getting caught, fooling around with the wrong people and just basically making a complete ass of himself. And then it takes a turn, and there's highwaymen and pirates and things like that. And it's just him trying to come to terms with the fact that maybe he should stop running from his problems and grow up a little bit. There was a lot more heavier themes in here than I expected. I was expecting it to be just straight up comedy. I wasn't expecting so much abuse and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I did enjoy it. I ended up giving it 4 stars.
All right, so I'm on to my booktubeathon.
Okay.
Stuff. And so I read Toil and Trouble, and this is by Marguerite Scott and Nicole and Kelly Matthews. This is, I think, a retelling of a Shakespeare story, but anyway, it's about 3 witches or forces of nature that kind of guide Macbeth and his adventures, I guess. I haven't read Macbeth because I don't really care for... I should try it again. I should try and read Shakespeare again, probably. But I enjoyed this enough. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was enjoyable. I read it straight through. I don't know if it's something that is going to stick with me. No.
Okay, the last thing before my booktubeathon was Infinity, Book 1 in the Chronicles of Nick by Sherilyn Kenyon. And this was a story about I don't even know how to describe it. But basically it's this kid finding out that it's like an urban fantasy. He finds out he has like parentage that is kind of like in the preternatural or whatever. Like his father is this weird like half demon thing, and so I usually hate urban fantasy. It's like one of my least favorite YA genres. But I actually ended up giving this 4 stars. I listened to it on audio. I will not continue in the series, even though it's got like 7 books or something like that, because it's not my cup of tea. But I did enjoy the characters and this first story.
Awesome. All right, and then the next thing I read was The Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. This was a fun, short sci-fi story. This is a kind of comical adventure of this guy who is a criminal at first, but he gets recruited by the special service to try and hunt these other criminals, and so it sets off this chain of events where he thinks he's hunting this one person, but it was really this woman that was manipulating this guy, and she kind of, saw this guy, the main character, coming when he came to arrest him, and so he spends the rest of the book trying to like catch up with this girl and essentially outsmart her, but she consistently like outsmarts him throughout, and nice. He just gets frustrated and embarrassed. Anyway, I gave The Stainless Steel Rat 4 stars.
All right, and then I'm on to my booktubeathon stuff that I read. The first thing was I Am Najood, Age 10 and Divorced by Najood Ali. And this is a memoir story of this young girl. And she's married off at age 9, and she experiences a lot of rape and abuse. And she ultimately goes against her family and goes to the authorities asking for a divorce. And it turns into this big court case. And it's incredibly, like, horrible. But at the same time, like, it's a well-told story. It's just, like, the content is hard to listen to. But I did enjoy it. I'm not going to rate it because I don't like rating people's memoirs and stories about their life. I just feel like that it's a little weird. But I did enjoy it, and I do recommend it.
I read Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and I loved it. It was great. 5 stars. Yay! I'm hooked. I love just about everyone in this book, even the bad guys. Mm-hmm. The TV head people.
Right? So
really
cool.
Yeah.
Yes. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'll be reserving those at the library probably.
Yep. Fantastic. The next thing I read was Nailbiter Volume 5 by Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson. And I love this series. This is so great. It is so bloody. It's about a town that has produced 16 serial killers, and they're trying to figure out why, and like if it's genetic, if it's something in the water or the environment that's turning them, like what is it? And I just love this series. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know. I don't know how much farther they can stretch the story, but I'm definitely along for the ride.
And the last thing I read, which I finished right like at 11 o'clock last night at the end of Booktubeathon, was The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke. This is a story about a single city that is left at the end of human civilization. It's a utopian society, but it's also a closed society, and so for the random new people that are born that aren't part of the genetic overall structure of the reoccurring population, just because of a flaw or whatever, a new person pops in every 1,000 years or whatever. So the main character is one of those individuals, and he's very curious about what's outside the city, why humans abandoned space travel when they had pretty much conquered the galaxy. And it's his adventure going on that. And I love these types of stories. I did this on audiobook. It did not... I don't think that's the right format for it. All of Clarke's stories really stick with me, and and are fun the whole way through. This one, I found myself not keeping track at certain points, and I think it's because it was on audiobook. The way that he writes wonder and just curiosity and wonder and amazement at the universe and the possibility of everything and adventure and human society, things like that. It's so, he writes it so beautifully that audiobook, I think, it just doesn't translate well. You have to read the written word.
That premise sounds really cool.
Yes, it was a really beautiful story, and I gave it 4 stars.
I read Fortunately the Milk. This is a really crappy copy, but this is by Neil Gaiman. And I'm sad that I listened to it on audio and missed out on all of these awesome illustrations. But that being said, I loved the audiobook. Neil Gaiman narrates all of his stuff. And you can tell that this is such a great story from a dad to his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it's like a dad story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's just explaining why it took him so long to go to the store and get milk for the kids' cereal. And there's like aliens and time travel and all sorts of craziness happening. And it is really funny. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it.
I'm glad you read that one.
You're done, right?
I'm done, yeah.
Okay. I also listened to The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman on audio. And I'm actually glad I skipped on the illustrations on this one because, okay, let's try this again for like the 3rd time. Hopefully my phone is better. Okay, so the next thing I read was Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book, which is about a young boy who ultimately gets named Nobody, and I thought that was amusing. And he's growing up in a graveyard with ghosts and a vampire as his guardians. And this pretty much spans his life from like 2 years old to like 15 years. And he's, you know, going on little adventures and learning about stuff. And I gave it 4 stars. I think it was a little more slow and rambly than I thought it was going to be. And then ultimately, in the end, he realizes that, you know, he spent his entire life with people who have already lived their life and their life is over and he hasn't got that opportunity yet. And anyways, 4 stars. And then I listened to Nothing by Jane Teller. And when I picked this one up, someone was comparing it to Lord of the Flies. And I didn't understand why, but now I get it. Because I love Lord of the Flies. And this definitely gave me some of those vibes in that young kids can, in a large group, can be quite unforgiving and brutal. And I really thought this was cool. I don't really know how to explain it without giving anything away. But basically it's like this whimsical story of one child saying nothing's important, nothing has value, and then the rest of his class trying to come together and show him that there is meaning and value in the world, and their complete lack of success in that endeavor. So I gave that 4 stars. I enjoyed it. And the last thing that I finished this month was Warm Bodies by Isaac Marion. This is a zombie love story situation, although apparently from what I saw of the preview for the movie, it's very different, because this was definitely more of a slow story of like the world is at the very last gasp, basically. Like humanity is on its way out. It's like down to the last city or two, and everything else is zombies. And it's kind of a story of how many of the humans have just given up and, you know, gotten to the like suicidal point and just like there's no point in we've just been barely surviving for so long. There's no actual living and creating going on. And one zombie is told from a zombie's point of view, and him realizing that he does not want to die, he actually wants to live, and he teams up with this human girl, and together they try and save the world.
No.
Yeah. And I gave that 4 stars.
Buddy read announcement here, and that's Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, and I'm going to be buddy reading this over the course of August with Nicole from Who Picked This Book. Of course, I'll link her information down below. And so that's the one book I'm going to focus on for August.
Yeah.
August, because work's been slammed lately. So I'm just going to focus on this, make sure I don't let down a buddy on a buddy read.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
You need those buddies.
All right. We'll see you next time, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.